now, and then I'll just stop because the slides are like fun on their own accord. So let's see if you could deduce the story that I'm going to tell you just from the pictures. Okay. Yeah, you're still seeing the slides, all right? Yeah. So this is not what I am. The other one is more like what I am or what I do. Like, okay, no comments here. I'll talk about it later, about why all these guys have a puzzled look on their faces. The basic idea is that, yeah, the insight and the conscious understanding is very good, but it's not the only thing that's going on. There's lots going on below the surface. Right? Yeah, this is actually in Russian. So remember this red line around the subconscious mind? We'll talk about it later, what it means. Okay, so this guy's name is critical faculty, but most people call him critical factor, and he doesn't like it. He likes to be called critical faculty. Anyway, this is my version of a Dilts pyramid, which you might be familiar with. It goes from environment in the top to, like, usually Dilts pyramid has the skills level somewhere around here. And that the deeper you go, the more you move from the environment behavior to the area of beliefs, identity, and purpose. And that red line between the conscious and subconscious lies somewhere in the area of beliefs. It could be a little bit up and down, but more or less, the beliefs is something that you can sort of summon to conscious attention sometimes. Most of the behavior and environmental things go on at the conscious level. Well, when you get to the identity things, that's when you need to work with the subconscious mind. Okay, this is just a picture that we'll talk about it later. And this is how things begin. And you see that, by the way, there's nothing super terrible going on here, right, in this picture. So this is significant. This is just the mother being unhappy about something and the child trying to process it and somehow understand what's going on and create some programming for himself to stay safe and to feel good, basically. Right, so it doesn't have to be super big trauma for this thing to happen. We'll talk about it later. This happy guy is a client who's been given access to his internal programming. And this wrench is maybe not the best thing that should be on this on this drawing, but you get the point. It's not me, right? This guy is not me. This guy is the client. I'm just a guide who helps to open the door and who kind of looks over what he's doing there to make sure he's not doing any stupid things. But overall, it's the client himself or herself who is given the chance to go in, see what's going on in their operating system, and fix it themselves. It's a bit of a detective work. And the goal is to find that one very specific place, which we do like a laser beam surgery kind of thing on. Right? And when we find the root for a particular behavior, it's usually very small and it takes a lot of time to find it. But when we find it, healing happens really quickly. And it's more or less permanent after that. Yeah, and this is just a nice and warm symbol of me inviting you to the world of what I'm doing, because I think you might find it interesting. And because the point of this presentation is not to discuss whose approach is better or what works and what doesn't, but rather to think together about how we can complement each other, and in what cases this approach that I'm representing could be very interesting for you guys. Okay, so I think I can stop the slides now and show my face. So I'm here today because I want to tell you that I have stumbled on an approach that's using transformational hypnotherapy that has been surprisingly helpful for people. And I get surprised every time when I've seen people who've struggled with the same issue for years and years, and they've been labeled hopeless or like a total mess or whatever the scientific term is. But they finally were able to move on and get past those blocks and resume their progress. The problem is that insight sometimes is not enough. Insight is crucial, obviously. You need it. Understanding why problems happen and recognizing uh, someone's unhealthy patterns is always a necessary first step. Without it, we can't really go anywhere. We can't do much without it. But we regularly see the clients having those aha moments, connecting the dots. And yet, by magic, the old patterns just keep being reactivated, especially in a stressful situation, right? So someone might be someone might talk about how they're going to do it next time it happens, whatever the situation might be. But then next time they get into a situation and they're like, I did it again. I don't know what happened. Like I totally forgot about everything that I understood, right? So why does that happen, basically, at the foundation of things? And so the theory is, and it's a pretty well accepted theory because it's the psychoanalysis and whatnot is based on this. But basically that there is such thing as a subconscious mind, and that the conscious mind that's sort of on top of things doesn't really control everything. So it has a very limited sphere of control over our behavior or our feelings or our events in the life or situations we get into. And the reason why we can't sometimes progress or cure people with just conscious understanding alone is because we don't go deep enough. We don't get to those deeper levels of subconscious that hold things like subconscious beliefs and the sense of personal identity. And that's where our programming is actually running. It lives there and it runs there most of the time. And hypnotherapy as a method, the application of hypnotic trance to clinical work, is basically about getting through that barrier between the conscious and the unconscious mind and enabling people to work directly with the contents of their subconscious mind and programming and convictions. Almost everything that you can do with people while in a normal state of consciousness, you can also do with them in a trance. And when you do certain things in a trance, they have the tendency to penetrate to the subconscious mind and work differently than when you apply them, sometimes better than when you apply them in a conscious state. And then, you remember that circles with the conscious and the subconscious and the red line between them. So the red line is what's called the critical faculty or critical factor. The point of this thing is to maintain the status quo inside us. So there's like a black box server room inside every one of us that is basically responsible for the operating system, most of the things that happen and how we run, basically. And we don't have access to that. That server is programmed until we are about 5 to 7 year old. And the server is programmed with everything that's happening around us. We don't have the ability to filter things out at that age. So if you remember, if you look at a 3 or 4 year old, all they're doing is just looking at the world and absorbing everything as if a tape recorder was running inside their head. They're just absorbing everything that happens around them. But at some point, they get to teenage years and they stop absorbing. And they think that they know everything. So they become a little arrogant sometimes. I have a 15-year-old son, and I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. But that happens because at that age, they start to think that they've absorbed everything that there is to know about the world, and they kind of shut down. That server shuts down, gets locked, and it gets locked for security, just like real servers in real life. You know, when the program is running, you're not supposed to actually go in there and mess with it, right? So nature kind of does the same thing. Once the initial program is done, it gets covered by a firewall of a critical factor, and it doesn't let any new information inside that server, inside that operating system, that easily, because it's safer this way, right? And what it does, it compares the information that comes from the outside with the information that is already inside, and it basically rejects everything that's not congruent with what we have inside already. That's why it's been said that the first thing we learn about something becomes our opinion. And when we do have an opinion, then it becomes very difficult to change it. And that's why we struggle when we give to persons something that is useful and it makes sense on the conscious level, and they agree with it consciously. But then when they try to change their actual programming, they don't have the access. It just bounces off because it's not what it is. And to give you a very, very straightforward and real example, like if someone from the childhood has been subjected to a situation where they decided to believe that they have no value themselves, right? For example, they have to please others to be loved, right? But they are not enough to be loved as they are. And that became a basic conviction. Then no matter how many times anyone would say to this person that, you are loved as you are, and the person might repeat those affirmations 20 times every morning, but deep down, it's not going to change anything. They'll still going to believe that they're fooling themselves, or people are lying to them, or maybe there's something suspicious going on. But the basic reality doesn't change because of what we say or do at the conscious or behavioral level. And by basic reality here, I mean the internal basic reality of a person, right? And no matter whether it's us who say this or a person themselves, it just doesn't penetrate that critical factor. It bounces back off. Okay, so what hypnosis is, and I said it already, is a method that allows us to sort of help the person to get into a certain condition where they become able to persuade that security guard, that firewall, that wall, to sort of relax a little bit and smile and maybe go for a coffee, and give us a chance to enter that server room, see what's going on, get a low-level admin access to the system, and read the logs and figure out what's going on, understand what the negative program is, or what is the conviction that is not serving you anymore. And then they can replace it with a positive program. And again, it's not me who's doing it, it's them. When that happens, then there's an experiential shift. There is a change that is not simply understood, but that's felt, deeply felt on the level of the body and of the level of the whole psyche. And immediately when that happens, the person emerges from this a different person. In some way, I'm not saying one time is enough to fix everything, but in some way, after a successful hypnotic session, you come out a little bit different person than you were. And not because you've understood something, but because you've truly changed. It's a pretty mysterious thing, to be honest with you, and I'm still amazed every time that happens. Now remember that pyramid. Okay, we talked about it a little bit, but it's basically the levels. The top level is environment, then there's behavior, and then there's beliefs. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, with when you do therapy with words, in a fully conscious state. So maybe maybe body work is a little different. Maybe some other, kinetic things could be a little different. But more or less, when you do therapy with words, you are rarely able to go deeper than the beliefs. And mostly you stay on the level of behavior and on the level of correcting the environment. And that's fine, right? It's good. It's needed. It's necessary. Because a lot of times the behavior does need to be corrected, and people do need to be taught to do different things. And people do need the understanding to make changes in their environment and do things. And yet, when you get when you talk about relations that get stuck, it's usually because you don't go deeper than the beliefs. And deeper than the beliefs is the level of identity. So it's basically beliefs of what I believe, right? And identity is who I am. So someone might believe that they are not capable of doing something, right? Or someone may believe that people are this way or the world is this way. And those things are already pretty hard to correct, right? But when you get to things like I'm bad, or I'm weak, oh, I don't deserve to exist, or I'm here and I'm just bringing everybody trouble. Like that's not a belief anymore. That's an I am statement. And those things are very difficult to get to for the reason that that people are not consciously aware of them. And no matter how much you can talk about things, you just can't get to correcting the level because you don't even know that it's there. Here, I want to talk about another thing for a moment, that you've probably noticed that a lot of times the problem that the people come with is not actually the problem, right? So they think they have this problem, but you start digging and then you realize that the problem is completely elsewhere, or maybe something very different, right? And it's the same thing happening here. So the nature of the subconscious programs and convictions, the nature of things that live at the level of identity, is that with life, when a person has gone through 10 or 20 years of living like this, or 30 or 40 years of living like this, they've come up with protective mechanisms. And they've come up with things that shift their perceptions in a way that it becomes impossible for them to even detect those negative programs. So the programs sort of protect themselves in this way, right? And the true negative program, the true seed of the problem that we're dealing with, will sometimes resist even detection. It's not like the person will come to you and say, oh, I know my problem is this, I just can't do anything about it. It's that you start with that, and when you get deeper, you get into something really sometimes irrelevant on the first glance, right? Or you're looking for a trauma. Someone comes to you with trauma and they say, okay, my problem started when I was assaulted or abused when I was, age, whatever, 13 or 8. And you go into that, and then you find that at that age, when that terrible thing happened, the feeling of being helpless and not being able to protect yourself did not originate from that experience, but it is the child got into that experience and reacted to it in a certain way that really influenced them because they already had that feeling inside them, right? And then you start digging deeper and you come to some innocent looking situation, like the baby was in the crib, was 3 months old, and the mother was busy, and I don't know, their hand got stuck in somewhere in a crib, and nobody was there to help them. And the mother came back in 5 minutes and helped them out, and the issue was over. But those 5 minutes really created that program in the mind of the baby that I'm helpless and I can't do anything to protect myself. I think you realize by now that it's pretty hard to get to a memory of a 3 months old with, discussing, I don't know, relationship with the woman's husband or whatever else the presenting problem might be. There's just no mechanism outside of maybe a psychoanalysis traditionally that takes 5 years and 300, 400 sessions. And even then, it's mostly discussed in words. So Jungian methods is a little better because it's more symbols than words. But who has 5 years to uncover those things these days, right? So my method works in 5 sessions, and that is, I think that is good, right? Compared to psychoanalysis. The miracle that happens is when you get a person into a state of comfortable concentration and relaxation, which is like a hypnotic trance, then they are able to access those memories. And not just as memories, but they relive those experiences. They experience that situation in a crib as if it was going right now, as if it was, or as if she was a 3-month-old girl at this moment. And when we get to that level, then we're able to consciously process what happened. So we basically invite the adult into that situation and we say, look, does this program make sense anymore? And they say, of course not. Right? Does the fact that your hand get entangled in a crib mean that you are basically helpless and you can't do anything? And that all happens in trance, of course. So it's a very special method. I'm just giving you a very quick overview. And they say, no, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean that I'm basically helpless. It just means that my hand got stuck in a crib when I was 3 months old. And we say, okay, so let's figure this out and let's relive that situation with this new understanding. And when you do that, what happens is a very interesting thing. The situation doesn't change, but the emotional charge dissolves. And that the person is able to live through that situation again without that emotional charge. And then when you bring them back to that memory, in our example of maybe 8 years old when that really serious trauma happened, then the person starts, it's hard to explain. It's like they start to create a different version of events because they are different. And you all know that whatever happens to us is as much a function of what actually happens as it is a function of our internal state at the moment. That's true for every one of us at any age. And so when that girl relieves the trauma that happened at 8 with the new internal state, because she doesn't believe anymore that she's basically helpless and cannot protect herself, then she's able to relieve that situation in a different way. And from then on, it's like you take a weed and you find its root. And when you take the root out, the whole other situations in life, they just sort of resolve. This is a very simplistic word. And of course, it doesn't happen, right away in a minute, but it begins the process of transformation that's then able to unfold on its own. And it's able to help a person to get over that block, whatever the block might be. And in some cases, it enables the person to continue the therapy, right, with the regular therapist. but in a completely different way, on a different ground. It's like you can sense that they've moved on to a different level, and then you're able to continue the work with them. So it's really fascinating. Basically, you have to fix problems on the level where they originated, right? So if a problem originated on the level of behavior, that's where you fix it. Level of belief, that's where you fix it. Level of environment, and so on. But if you try to fix the problem that's originated on the level of the identity with superficial methods, then it's not like Dill says. It's almost as if you're trying to save the Titanic by trying to rearrange the chairs on the deck, right? So it's different level of action, different level of influence, and that's why I think the hypnotic state that allows you to enter that subconscious mind, see what's going on, and reprogram it works sometimes in a situation where other methods don't really work that well. Imagine a situation where you were in a position of, having to prove yourself or having to demonstrate your skill, right? Wouldn't you be more efficient at that task at the moment if your internal I am statement was, I am powerful, I'm the guy who can overcome any adversity, right? Because I quit, and this because of who I am. I'm strong, right? Wouldn't you be more efficient if that was the first thing that flashed to your mind in a challenging situation, right? But everyone still has those things, right? We're just compensating them really well. And people who are our clients maybe haven't figured out a way to compensate it that well. And maybe they've had a stronger trauma, or maybe they've had an I am statement inside them that has a much bigger emotional charge, to the point that they lose themselves, right? They lose it in a situation, basically. And they just do whatever that internal feeling dictates them to do without being able to take charge in the moment. And then they realize it a few seconds later, and it's like, why am I like that? Why wasn't I able to do it differently this time? I know this. I've worked through this. I know what to do. And yet in the moment, there's absolutely nothing that the person can do to counteract a program that's strong enough, right? And those programs, like you just witnessed, they lie on a level deeper than a regular conversation can address. The identity level is not the deepest level. There is something deeper than that. And that's called, people call it various things, but you can call it purpose, or you can call it something higher. It's a point where actually inside that subconscious thing, there's something called superconscious, and it's of course debatable. Here we get into a not very scientifically evidence-based territory, but I'm very influenced by the works of Michael Newton, if you know him, who used hypnosis to get people into the transpersonal situations, like even before the conception, so to speak, whatever it might mean in any particular case. But the thing is that every person, even just the biggest Darwinist and materialist in the world, the biggest atheist in the world, they all have something that's bigger than them. They all have a sense of purpose. And not only who I am, but why am I here? What's the sense of it all? What am I doing? And what are my universal measures of good and evil? And, how should things be? And what do I represent from that higher superconscious meta physical world, if you want to put it this way? And it's very individual for everyone, right? But something deeper than the level of a personal identity does exist. And there exists something deeper than the level of trauma as well. So the trauma, the deepest the trauma can reach is the identity. And it's terrible. It's terrible when the identity of a person is I'm worthless or I'm weak. But beyond that, there is always a place where no trauma can reach. It's a part of ourselves that's, as he says, unwoundable. It can't be wounded. It's always intact. And sometimes with hypnosis, it's both necessary and useful. And sometimes it happens that we are able to tap a little bit into that sense of purpose that then is able to heal the identity. And then it just cascades all the way out. Because when you fix the identity, you fix the beliefs. And when you fix the beliefs, you don't have to fix the behavior. It just fixes itself. I mean, when the behavior is fixed, then the environment changes and it becomes natural. And that's why you can sometimes achieve a very quick and lasting changes with this method. And yeah, and the other thing that happens with people when you do that is not only do they get rid of the problem that they presented with, but it's like they say, I've changed. My whole perception of things have changed. I'm sure you've seen this as well as a result of other methods of therapy. I'm just amazed at how quickly it happens. If you get, and my art is to be a guide and to find that little place in the code, that little one line in the code that's wrong. And as I told you, people have developed a lot of distractors that prevent them from finding where the bug is, right? But when you manage to find that bug, the change is literally instantaneous. And it's just fascinating. I mean, I can't get over it every time it happens. Hypnotherapy has to be done by a qualified person, and the person who's careful and deeply ethical and knows how to do it. When people are not scared of hypnosis and they don't envision, people lying on the backs of the chairs, then what they do is they think of hypnosis as like, nap time, like guided nap. Like you lie down and you relax and someone says, oh, imagine yourself on the beach. You feel comfortable and people say, oh, I'm not suggestible. I can't imagine myself on the beach. So it doesn't work for me. No, it's not like that. And you give suggestions like you feel powerful, you feel empowered, you feel good, you feel great, and things like that. That works a little bit up to a point, but it's very temporary. And it can help you get through an interview tomorrow, right? But it's probably not going to create a permanent change. If I feel like I'm a failure and someone tells me to imagine myself on a beach and think that I'm successful, I might be under impression after the session for a day, but deep down, I know that I'm a failure, right? I just don't know where I got it from. And if someone helps me remember that and see that situation again and live through it again and realize that it was just an error of perception of a little boy, then I come out of it and I don't feel like I'm a failure anymore. But the aspect of it is when you get a person into the situation that they're reliving it when they're 3 months old, it's very, very important not to suggest that the situation is different. So it's very tempting for many hypnotherapists practicing hypnotherapy. They do it every day and it's terrible that they do it, but they still do. Is to suggest or to propose to this person that, okay, well, let's pretend like your mother came back 5 minutes earlier and she helped you out. And so you didn't feel like you were weak or incapable of helping yourself. problem solved, right? No, it doesn't work this way, because you can't lie to the consciousness, or you can't lie to the unconscious mind. Right? The only way to do it is to say, like we did before, the situation remains exactly the same, but the feeling, the emotional charge behind it changes, dissolves, because of the conscious understanding. And that's not really a suggestion. So I would say that I don't really give suggestions at all when I do hypnosis. And people do tend to equate hypnosis with giving suggestions. But I don't see it this way, because the suggestions that come from the external world will always bounce back sooner or later. But if you become like a guide, if you become a person who helps your client go into their code, figure out what's wrong, replace it with the right thing, their subconscious mind will give all the suggestions. Like it's amazing. I see it almost every time. The people's unconscious mind already holds the keys to the situation. People's subconscious already knows what to do. It knows about the problem and it has the solution. And my job is basically not to interfere. It's not to offer my own solution. It's to help the person get to their solution. Say it to themselves in their own words. Apply it to the problem. And it all happens within the confines of the infinite wisdom of the unconscious mind. And I don't mess with it. My job is to just get the person there and sort of wait outside while that process, the magical process, happens. Overall, hypnosis actually has a pretty solid research base, and I could give you some papers later. If you got the copy of my book, there's some links there to scientific studies, and it's for physical things as well. Like, it's not just mental disturbances, for pain, for allergy, IBS, small. What's
Yeah, you just got like half of a room.
there are people who do research on that, and it has a pretty solid neurobiological basis, actually, if you read into it. Overall, you can say it's like neural pathways, right? So neuroplasticity. Those are basically the things that explain it. So if you have an idea or a conviction that sort of gets stuck, it might or might not be represented somewhere in the nervous system, right? There's different. We don't have a theory of consciousness. We don't have a theory of memory, right? So all those things are like, it's more what you believe. But suppose that if somewhere in the nervous system there is a nucleus of some sort, of an electrical charge of some kind, where you hold that memory, right? Then you require a process of neuroplasticity and creating new neural pathways to get over this. Hypnosis, if done correctly, is very, very safe, because it's almost like nothing really happens. Like, someone just gets into a comfortable position, they get into a state between sleep and wakefulness, and then they talk. So we talk all the time with a client, and then they just tell me as if they had a dream while being awake. If you're doing things correctly and safely and ecologically, then there's really nothing that can go wrong, because everyone has their own internal protective system. And that's by the way, we should, I think, and I always do, and I believe that we all should approach any symptom or anything that's wrong in a patient as actually a protective system, something that is beneficial it's either a cry for help or it's something that got stuck. It's a behavior or conviction or something that was very useful at some point. So maybe if someone was a little child and they had to deal with aggression from an adult, then maybe it's the best thing for them at that moment was to become really quiet and not try to protect themselves and just wait it out, right? So it was a very good thing. But then when this person is 50 years old and she can't even, deal with the aggression from her husband or her boss, even though she's very successful otherwise, then this program doesn't make sense anymore. But it's important to realize that it did make sense at some point. It was protective and it just forgot to kind of stop. And that's where neuroplasticity comes in, that we can sort of rewire that memory. And maybe sometimes we can talk to this part and say, thank you for what you've been doing for the last 40 years since that happened. But do you realize, you're not a little girl anymore. You're not in physical danger anymore. So you can stand up to your boss and say, what do you think? And that part says, whew, I can rest now. I can do my thing, right? Maybe I was responsible for creativity initially and then had to take on this role of protection, right? So the person suddenly not only deals with the problem, but suddenly she begins to paint or to sing or to whatever, because the creative part was able to return to the original thing. So it's another magical thing that happens all the time. But the mind, the soul, whatever you want to call it, is very good at protecting itself. It's much easier to hurt someone with medication, with other psychiatric practices, than it is to hurt someone with hypnosis, if done correctly, unless you have malicious intent. But even then, your suggestions will probably be just rejected, like any other thing that's not useful. To quickly address your point on psychedelics and other neuroplasticity-related things, I do see a lot of potential in those if done correctly. But it's tricky. Could be tricky legally, could be tricky logistically, and all those things. And the other important thing is not everyone is ready for that. Not everyone is ready to face the substance or the plants. And so one of the applications of hypnosis is actually preparing people for those experiences and then doing the integration after those experiences. It's because you have to open up a little bit. You can't take a person on the street who's been working at an insurance company for 30 years and give him mushrooms. He'll go crazy.
Oh, what?
Yeah, so hypnosis does provide a lot of tools that can get close to that level, and sometimes even work better than that because it's guided and it's always under control. So with psychedelics, as you know, there might be issues with controlling things, and sometimes there might be a bad trip or whatever. But in hypnosis, we're always one step away from waking up and being in a safe place again. And the person only stays there for as long as they wish and they feel comfortable. And I can very, very well manage everything that comes up. If they get into a really traumatic situation and they start abreacting, I can get them out in a second and it'll be over in 5 seconds and we'll continue the work from a dissociated point of view and then we'll deal with it, right? So from that point of view, it's almost as effective, sometimes more effective, I would say, but definitely safer than psychedelics. Usually I try to make it 90 minutes. It doesn't always happen. If we're in the middle of something, it can drag up to 2 hours. I try not to do that because it can be tiring, but at the same time, sometimes it's necessary. So it's either once a week or it can be more intense. Sometimes I can do 5 sessions within 2 weeks if someone really wants to do it like seriously. But more often than once every 3 days, I don't think it's beneficial because you need the nervous system needs time to process things. And sometimes the insights or the changes that happen, they are not immediately obvious, and the person needs to live through situations and experience to sort of catch themselves that, oh, I did it. I acted differently this time. I didn't feel that fear. Oh, wow. So that moment needs to happen when they actually meet the situation and not when we talk about it during the session. Right? So that's why a week is usually a good time for the person to experience the results of a session and then be ready for the next. But it could be done more often. Once every 3 days is fine. Getting more than a week without the session is not so good because it dilutes the effects. Yeah, it's best to do one at a time, just because of the highly personalized nature of this work.
Right.
I could do something with a group, and I did, but it would be context-less work, which is
Right.
nice, and it helps. But, you know, how would you feel if you were not able to, if you had an insight or wanted to discuss something and you weren't able to discuss,
Right.
because the value comes in the interaction. It's not like someone lies down and I read a script to them, right? No, we're conversing, we're talking all the time, and we're processing whatever comes out. So it's a very interactive process, and that's why it's definitely better to do one-on-one. Age. Uh, I try not to work with, like, children are a special kind of people. Like, they, on the one hand, they always live in trance. So children are in trance all the time. They don't need inductions. But in my work, I try to stick to, 15, 16 and older, just because it's very important in this work that the person makes a conscious decision to ask for help and to come and talk to me. Uh, as you've probably gathered by now, I don't have any special talents or mental power. Like, I'm not the kind of person who would look at someone and they become hypnotized like a rabbit. I can't overcome anybody's will. I need the person to be willing and able to collaborate with me and to work together. And with kids earlier than a certain age, it's not that easy most of the time. The oldest patient I had in the last months was 78 years old. Actually, that was very effective. Yeah, I was a little bit. I'm not saying that 78 years is a lot, but you have to consider that there was a woman in Russia, in a small village, and there it's considered a pretty, old age in the mentality. She thinks about herself as a very old woman, right? And yet she was able to. I did a couple of sessions, and then what I did is I recorded. I recorded something for her, put it on music, and sent it to her. And then for the last month, she's been saying that it's the only thing that helps me sleep. I stopped my sleeping medication. I listen to this recording, every night and every morning and every day when I feel anxious, and it helps me sleep. So I'm very happy actually about this, the result. The issue of elderly is a charged one for me, because I have my own very special theory of what it takes to be happy and healthy. People who are parents and have children, they have issues with children. They want, of course, first of all, they bring their children to you, right? Fix them. Then your art and your profession becomes to convince the parents that no, let's start with you. Please, let's figure out, what's going on in your life. And they're like, I'm fine. I have a theory that it's not even that the parent that needs to be fixed. It's the relationship of the person with their own parents, whether they're living or dead.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
very true.
you have figured out a relationship with your parents, there's no way on God to be nurse that you can be an efficient parent yourself, because it just drags you. Another thing that's important in hypnosis and in our how mind is structured is that it's not what happens, it's how you perceive it. All right. So sometimes people say, well, did it actually happen at 3 months old that I was in a crib and I felt that? And I say, yeah, sometimes it's possible to verify it. Sometimes it isn't. But the question is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if it happened this way. It's how your subconscious mind has remembered it. That's what's important. And so if you extrapolate on the issue of working with parents, you can figure out that no, it doesn't matter if the parent is still alive or not, because you're not dealing with the parent. You're dealing with the imprint of that parent on the subconscious mind of the client. And so it is possible to straighten things up between a client and a parent who is no longer living. But it's especially important to straighten things up between the client and the parent who is living. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it is possible to an extent. But it's a very important therapeutic direction, I would say, because I think that a lot of problems that happen between the parents and their children actually have roots in the problems of, like I said, the relationship with their own parents. And that's why I'm really interested in expanding into more and more and working with elderly people and helping adults figure out the relationship with their elderly parents. I think it's a very important and overlooked area. Not many people in hypnosis or in psychotherapy in general are interested in that, but I think that holds a key for a lot of issues of everyday life. That's my theory. Anyway, it's my pleasure. I appreciate your spending. We know you have choice when you have lunch. I appreciate you spending your lunch with me. I wish you all the best. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.